Hello and welcome to this month's episode of New Rollers. I am your host, LeighErin, joined as always by Jordan, and
Hello.
we have a special guest today, Scott White, who's going to be taking us through all of his DMing stuff.
Hi, how's it going?
It's
Good,
good. How are
good.
you doing?
Doing well, doing well. Glad it's a
Um,
long weekend.
oh,
Oh
I know,
yeah,
thank God.
very needed.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I have a million things I have to do tomorrow. I'm absolutely one of those people. This has nothing to do with D&D, but I'm absolutely one of those people where it's like, yeah, we should adopt the 4-day work week. I'll work 10 hours if I get 3 days off. I don't give a shit.
Hell yeah, we should.
I say why stop at 4 days, make it a 3-day work week.
Yeah. My
Split it in
clients would
half.
just have a
Yeah.
meltdown about that.
Yeah.
But yeah, for anyone who has not watched any New Rollers content yet, this is New Rollers, a shared screens podcast where we're deep diving into everything Dungeons and Dragons. We've already done a live stream where we created our characters that we will eventually use for our campaign, and we did an interview last month with Corey Freight, who took us through his beginners to D&D PowerPoint, which was super helpful for me. And now we're just going to be diving in with some DMs who have created their own campaigns, created their own lore, know a lot more about it than I do, and Jordan and I are just excited to learn. So to start us off, Scott, how did you just start like playing Dungeons and Dragons? Like, what got you introduced?
Sure. So even before D&D, like in middle school and in high school, I had a close bunch of friends that we all played Magic the Gathering together. We played a lot of Magic like on our lunch hour and after school, etc. And that kind of just transitioned into one of us saying, "Hey, we should try Dungeons and Dragons sometimes." And from there, mostly it really took off when we were in college. And it really just started. We would meet up like on a weekly or bi-weekly basis, and we would just start playing. First games I ran were in 3.5. That was where I got my start. We played a lot more 3.5. I played a couple games in 4.0. And then it just kind of transitioned into playing in various groups over the years, and friends would come and go into the parties. I would go into other groups, and about 2.5 years ago now, actually, crap, it's getting close to the third year. I've been running a homebrew campaign for a bunch of friends fairly consistently on a weekly and bi-weekly basis. So
Hell yeah.
and so I just love it. I love the chaotic nature of tabletop role-playing games and how the best laid plans quickly go out the window. It's awesome. I love it.
Yeah, I don't remember what group it was from. I saw a tweet the other day that was like, my players just ruined my campaign because they decided to kamikaze their spaceship into this base and just kill everyone. The chaos is
Yeah.
absolutely the draw. I live for chaos. So when did you play it all not DM like as a
Oh
player
yeah.
before you start DMing? Yeah.
Oh, a lot. So I would say I've spent more time being a player than I have as a DM, especially prior to my main campaign. Like I would do shorter, couple month long stories or mini arcs and things. I would take over one of my groups of friends. We would usually do 3-4 month stints as DM and then finish kind of a mini arc or get to a point. It's like, okay, let's swap over to someone else so the DM could be a player and vice versa. So I find myself enjoying tabletop when I have that balance of both being able to tell and create the story as well as playing in a story. Like I need that balance. Otherwise I just get burned out doing one or the other.
Yeah. Yeah, I when people play with their friends, I'm always like, I feel like the DM is putting in the most work here. And that it can get like it can be a lot. Coming up with all these NPCs. I don't
The voices, well, I do voices for a lot of my NPCs, and the names and all that can be a lot. It can be a lot, but
Yeah.
So, a little bit talk to us a little bit about your homebrew. What inspired just like starting from scratch?
yeah, I've always been one of I've always loved the idea of creating and been interested in like perhaps one day writing my own story or writing a book and I think a lot of DMs have that fascination and kind of that spark at some point, whether or not they ever end up doing it. But just the idea of coming up and really having a blank slate and being able to populate and rewrite as you want is really freeing, and you can put a lot of ideas out there, and I've just always enjoyed and had those ideas for kind of creative ideas for stories. How can I do things different than your typical standard fantasy world? Like what could I do to bring something that my players have never really experienced before, or that I think they haven't experienced before, and working that into the story that I'm weaving with them, and what I can do to kind of drop little breadcrumbs um for them to discover about the world. And as my players shape the world as much as I shape the world in a lot of ways. The things they do, their backstories, I let them come up with, what's the name of your home village, or where do you come from, what are you interested in as a character, and then I take those ideas and then I flesh them out. It's just a joy and a pleasure, and I love that sense of creation and creativity I get a chance to do.
Yeah, I feel like part of the draw of tabletop, at least for me, is like I am a shitty video gamer. I'm not good at video games. Just like the freedom in D&D where I don't have to be good at game mechanics like I do with video games, where there's just like a little I can handle rolling a dice.
Yeah.
I cannot handle fighting anything in a video game. Every video I've seen of Tears of the Kingdom, I'm like, this is not absolutely not for me.
To be fair, I've got probably 70 hours. I'm not playing Tears of the Kingdom the way anybody on Twitter is. I'm playing a very different game.
We'll talk about that later because I have a million questions on how you
Just
are just
terms of,
playing
like-
a different game.
No, in terms of just like how good they are and the things they come up with. But for the noobs like us, Scott, what does a homebrew campaign mean?
Sure. So, in essence, a homebrew campaign is just a world, or it could be a city, or it could be an event in an existing thing that might not be fleshed out by like a Wizards of the Coast or something, that you create and kind of flesh out on your own.
Okay.
That's in essence what a homebrew is. It's a creation from your own mind, and it can be in an existing world or an existing place, but just not pre-written down, not a module usually. Yeah, so kind of like ad-libbing, or yeah, just custom stuff, like
Gotcha. Okay.
custom mod.
I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure if homebrew went into custom mechanics or anything like that.
It can. Homebrew
okay.
can be homebrew classes where people have fleshed out or made their own classes they want to rock. Custom homebrew deities for the world, like for warlocks. Could be homebrew items where they make just a cool idea for a magic item. That's a homebrew. There's a wide variety. You can have an individual little homebrew thing, which is just a sword that you make stats for, or an ability, all the way up to like what I'm doing, which is I have a world with its own systems and history and things like that, and some mechanics and magic items as well, but it really ranges the gambit.
So when you started this homebrew campaign, did you start with all your players at level 1, or were they slightly higher?
I like to start around level 3, the level 2 or 3 area, simply because it gives my players the opportunity to experiment with the class. Like if I start with level 2, it gives players a bit of an idea of, okay, this is how the class works, and then once they hit 3, they will have had a little experience by that point. It's like, okay, how do I want to specialize? Like, what aspects of this class do I really want to dive into? Because at level 3, you can pick your specialization in that class. So I usually like to start between the level 2 and 3 area, especially for newer players. If I'm running a mini campaign or something for friends that have played for, like, more experienced friends, then I usually go level 5. Just because you're more established, you know what you want, you have some cool stuff by that point. You can skip the more introductory beginner levels that don't offer that. From a DM perspective, you can't really send a lot of very cool things at a party of like level 1 or 2 players that you could a party of level 5. You can start getting into some cool stuff.
Okay.
So, yep.
What goes into when you're starting? We are starting at level 1 because we are literally all new
Yeah,
to this, and we all need to learn
yeah,
our mechanics and
yeah.
how to just be. um and a big shift from, I feel bad for Jordan. I constantly remind you it's not a video game. We're not playing against the DM. You're not trying to beat anybody. You cannot call the DM a whore the way you call your PS5 a
Oh,
whore.
you can just expect retaliation from your DM.
That's fair.
But
But yeah, so we're still all starting at level 1, but
mhm.
I've watched campaigns where they start at the higher levels. What goes into the process of creating a character at a higher level for the beginning of a campaign?
um, I think you had to have a reason to start off as a higher level. I think it doesn't make sense. Like level 1 characters, basically stat wise and stuff, you're slightly stronger than your typical like townsfolk person. So by the time you're like level 5, it's like you are like special forces as like you are very, you've proven yourself, you're confident in everything. So if I'm starting them at a higher level, then it's okay, you're experienced, you're kind of well known, you've dealt with things before, um not like world ending threats or something, but
Mhm.
there's a reason that you're kind of that strong. um for lower level characters, yeah, it's like it's just starting out ragtag, surviving by the skin of your teeth and your wits. So
Truly is where we're going.
yeah,
Is
I
there
just really hope somebody chooses to be a cleric. I don't care which of the guys it is, but I need one of them to pick a cleric because we
I'm
don't
with
have
you.
one right now,
Yeah.
and that makes me nervous.
I was gonna ask, is there and what is, if there is, the level cap in D&D?
right now the main level cap is level 20. That is like a class cannot progress past level 20, but technically if you want, you can start getting into then multi-classing, and then you can multi-class multiple classes up to
Okay.
level 20, but traditionally level 20 is where you top out.
Okay, yeah, no, that puts that in the levels into much better perspective for
Yeah.
me.
And in the hierarchy of things, like level 20 is like, yeah, you've probably stopped one or two world ending events. Like you have nigh godly like powers. You could destroy villages with a flick of the wrist, kind of like if you're a
You
wizard.
are essentially Superman.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, there are a few things that prove to be a issue for a party of 4 level 20 characters at that
and
point.
does the levels for like NPCs or creatures that
Mhm.
they're fighting, does that also only go up to level 20, or can you make them a little
No.
higher to like give a challenge?
So monsters specifically don't have levels per se. They have what's known as a challenge rating. That gives you an idea, a rough idea that can be tweaked, but what a good number of like a party of 4 around that level could ease or relatively comfortably take. But for a lot of the bigger monsters like your Tiamat, your dragon gods and things like that, you can have your Thoracics, you can have challenge ratings of 29, 37, like big. That would be a challenge for parties of the high teens, low like 20. um
Okay.
so there are monsters and stuff that are geared towards those super high level parties, and when one of them it doesn't do it, you just throw in a second one, and that usually
Yeah.
Just toss
helps.
in another
Yeah,
one.
just throws in, okay, sure, why not.
We'll just outnumber your party. It's fine.
Yeah, two ancient
So
dragons, let's do it.
And do
yeah.
you power scale based on where everyone is in the story, or do you power scale based on the storyline of like, hey, by the time we reach this destination, all the enemies are going to be this challenge level, and so if somebody hasn't reached that
Yeah.
yet, that's kind of on them.
I think the best approach is gearing the encounter for what you're trying to, what kind of emotional or story beat you're trying to present with the players. Um if you want your party to feel like they've gained, like, one of the things I like to do is, like, in early levels they might face a couple like goblins, like a low level enemy, two or three enemies, have a good challenge, and then maybe when they're level 5, I would throw like a smaller mob, like 10 goblins. If I want them to feel like they're stronger, like they've come a long way, I would throw a lot of lower level enemies that they could pull out their big area of effect attacks, or that they could really show off that and feel that they've gotten stronger. If I want to um provide them a challenge, or a method that they can kind of play with some of the tricks and see how they can kind of more of a problem solving, as opposed to, oh my gosh, they're going to either live or die, um
Mm.
then I'll choose monsters that maybe have resistance to things that they've been doing a lot. And if my parties are feeling a little, getting a little too big in the breaches and are feeling a little overconfident, I'll up the difficulty a little bit, um to be like, okay, like, you're not like Superman yet, like you're not like superheroes yet, like be a little humble. But for me, it's more about what kind of encounter and what emotional story beat I'm going for at the time.
I
uh,
feel like a lot of our campaigns are going to be the DM being like, y'all get a little too big for believing a little too, your hype a little too much. We're just going to smack you right back down. It's fine.
You need to be
Um,
humbled sometimes.
yeah.
oh, hey, Jordan, I say all the time that the point of our friendship is I keep you humble.
Yeah,
Like, I
yeah,
humble
sure.
you. It's fine. So jumping off that, how do you, as a, I don't know if any of your players have done this, but in research, I've seen the term murder hobos thrown around a lot.
Yeah.
Where there's this idea, what I was reading was saying, especially from like people coming from video games, where the idea is, oh, I have to kill until it's dead. And that in Dungeons and Dragons, that isn't necessarily the goal you're looking for. So, how do you as a DM handle like a band of murder hobos?
um I think at that point it's, I need to take into account, like, what I would look for is, okay, what are the party's alignment? Like, are they trying, like, ideally, are they, do they view themselves as good characters?
Mhm.
Like a cleric or a paladin, are they viewing themselves as righteous and noble individuals? Um at which case I'd be like, okay, by, if you keep doing this, your alignment's going to shift. You might lose favor with your deity or your patron. You might get kind of powered down until you kind of redeem yourself and stop murdering people all the time. Um, if they are, if the story is starting to shift, or what the players want is more into like an evil or neutral or kind of a gray campaign, um, then I might try and lean into it a bit more. Like, make them, put them in situations where they can be the baddies, and kind of tempt them, or not necessarily tempt them, but put them in situations where it's like, okay, what do you want to do here? If they go that route, okay, maybe they become wanted or things along those lines. So I think there's always a good point where, excuse me, I think in even the best campaigns, players need catharsis at sometimes, where they just need to blow off steam and use all their big attacks and just have fun doing kind of the crazy things. So in situations like that, I'll do like a small mob of like warring or attacking, ravaging beasts, like taking a village where they can let off that steam. Um, but outside of that, when they start getting a little too, um, depending on how they're running their characters or what their characters are and what they want them to be, then I would either, okay, you've done a lot of kind of not good things and you're trying to be a good character. There's repercussions.
Mhm.
Um, and if everyone wants to kind of be those baddies, then I kind of take the lead from the players and it's like, okay, let's have you be the baddies then. So
Okay.
It's good to know.
My next question just flew out of my head. Um, Oh, when you're with your homebrew campaign,
yeah,
do you have anything about the setting you want to share, or what
yeah, sure.
inspired it?
In terms of what inspired it, I honestly have no idea. The world is known as Telthradus. It is a sprawling world full. Has about 7 main continents, with various capitals and everything. You have your more traditional, fantasy, like kind of medieval fantasy ish, European fantasy kind of kingdoms. You have your holy theocracy city run by the Pope in the area. You have a more deserty kind of like Australian continent, which has recently seen a boom due to the discovery of these ancient, almost science fiction-esque ruins underneath the sands, underneath the dunes. You have like an archipelago nation. You have kind of all mixed. You have like a mountain kingdom, where less a kingdom and more of just a big. That's where a lot of the ore and stuff comes from. And then you have a small area, a small kind of subcontinent, like an island, larger island that kind of the world's main mercenary force, the Gilded Hawks, kind of have taken up refuge, or not refuge, but kind of taken up residence, and that's where they dispatch their stuff from. So we have the Holy Kingdom of Hud, the Thrain Empire, Lei'Erin Vale, Malduk, which is kind of this walled off nation after a volcano eruption that has some stuff about 50 years prior to the main campaign. You have kind of a northern land, kind of Nordic country known as Perch, the Bright Sea Archipelago. You have kind of a smaller mini United States kind of thing known as the Collective States of Calvard. Crandor is where that mercenary group lives. Mindu Dare's that kind of deserty ruin place. And then I just kind of went from there. It's like I drew the map, and then it was okay. Let's think of some cool sounding fantasy kind of D&D names and throw them on there. And then from there, okay, well, these need cities, and just kind of grew from there. So
Building out from there, yeah.
yeah.
So when you were starting the homebrew campaign,
Yeah.
a big thing we've been talking about getting ready for our campaign is how all of our characters meet and like know each other. When you were starting to plan out the homebrew campaign, did you already have an idea of how your characters would know each other or meet, or like what a big thing they were going to be working towards of how they would all come together to be the adventuring party would happen? Or
Yeah, so the initial party that I had was that they all knew each other, that they were kind of sent from Calvert to investigate some strange happenings and trying to get into contact with someone. But I had them start with them, in essence, waking up in a burned field with no memory of how they got there and about 4 or 5 months of missing time from their memory. Like they came to
like the
the
second
area.
season of Young Justice.
Um, so basically, they wake up having no idea, a general idea of where they could be, but like it was a different season. So they're like,
Mhm.
"What happened?" And that kind of spawned. Okay, that put the players. It's like, okay, well, we have to figure out what happened. What are we forgetting? And then they eventually met up with others. Um, just one by happenstance that just kind of tagged along, and the others they were kind of assigned to by some people that were helping them, and that's how the current party has been formed and been adventuring. So
Nice. We've been playing with all the different ways of how we want to handle how our party knows each other, how we've met. Because we may have screwed ourselves over a little bit in that only three of us were on that stream to create the characters together, and we didn't really talk about backstory. We got really tied up in the like abilities and given the numbers to abilities. We
mm-hmm.
had somebody in the chat that was coming in clutch for that because I was like, is it that important if I'm wise? And they were like, kind of.
Shout out to
Kind
Adam.
of.
Well, I think with a lot of backstories, like it's I've had characters that two of them worked really knew each other previously and then didn't know the others. I don't think everyone has to know each other in a party.
Mhm.
Of course, that's perfectly fine when you do. And I don't think you need a super fleshed out story right from the get go. Maybe I come from here. I really like X thing, and I'm traveling around because I want to find out why. And I find through the course of just playing and role playing with the characters, the players will naturally, at least from my experience, it seems like players, and even from my own experiences, will just kind of naturally have those epiphany, like aha moments while they're playing or listening to music. It's like, this would be really cool if this is why my character's doing this. And it could
Mhm.
be months down the road, and they could reveal it just out of or drop a hint and follow a thread that they want to investigate and kind of evolve. So
Yeah, because Jordan and I talked a little bit about how we didn't want to do it for the first one, because we're too codependent on each other. But eventually, we
Yes.
would like to play characters that we created together that have a relationship, like whether it's familial or we've
Mhm.
known each other for like 20 something years, just because we are close and it's fun and we're monsters. Um, so yeah, I was just we've been having a big debate about how we want to handle that and go forth.
Yeah.
Um, but kind of jumping off with backstories,
Yeah.
in your homebrew campaigns, how, or any campaign really, how do you handle having like secrets, like anything that, like, you know, somebody could be off on their own doing their own thing and they know, like, kind of the idea of metagaming where it's like you only know what your character knows in the game in theory.
Mhm.
How do you handle like revealing secrets to your players? Do you do it at the table? Is that something you do outside gameplay? How do you kind of handle
So
that kind of stuff?
primarily we play on through Discord, though, especially as it gets nicer, we usually try and meet once every month or so, at like a brewery and play there.
Mhm,
But in terms of secrets, if it has to do specifically with a character, particularly their backstory or something that's big and more meaningful to them, I
mhm,
will take them into another chat and kind of role play with them in there. Um, Leaving it up to that player when or if they want to share it with the others.
mhm,
Um, and that helps with the metagaming aspect, I find, and it keeps the the person I speak with privately invested. Like, it's a big thing for them, and it gives them ownership of the information they have,
yeah,
whether or not they share, or how they share it, or when they feel comfortable doing it. Just recently, in the last session I had with my players, um, it was a big turning point for one of the players. She finally revealed kind of her backstory and everything to the party. It was a very big character building moment, um, revealing that she was a Haragon, and like a rabbit race, kind of like Vieira esque. So more Vieira like than just like a bipedal rabbit.
mhm,
Looked human, but she always had her hood up, and um, it was her letting down those walls with the other players to kind of shed some of that defensive exterior
mhm,
that she had for the past 2 years in the game, and that was a really big and impactful moment. Um, and I think it being able to letting players have their secrets, so they
mhm.
can, when they want, kind of share, is a really cool moment. Brings about a lot of cool moments.
So, with that specific example,
Yeah.
how do you go about deciding whether or not an event knocks down the character's hood without it becoming very clear to everyone else? Oh, this person's constantly doing checks to figure out whether or not their hood's on, which is a very specific and weird thing to keep asking the DM to roll a check for.
Uh, i- Honestly, that was one of those things that I attribute it to magic.
Okay.
There was no like she's like a witch warlock kind of character. It never really came up or was asked like, "Oh, why is your hood always up?" It just That wasn't my story to tell. So
Okay.
it was because I knew she's a friend of mine. We've been friends for a long time, and I know this was a very big part of her character. So if I had done, okay, a large gust of wind comes, blows down your hood, and reveals your ear, that would have been such a slight against her character. And it's like it's an enchanted. It's one of those things you can just kind of fluff off. You're in a magic world.
Mhm,
It's like it's an enchanted hood that just stays up, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
mhm.
Um, but things like that, I think it's not the DM's place to to do those reveals.
Yeah. I'll reword that a little bit then. Like, if this player didn't, if they were
Yeah.
open to the idea of, like, hey, maybe this is something that gets discovered not on my own terms, do you go about it in any different sort of way, or is that
Uh,
something that you would maybe discuss beforehand?
It would be a situation I would probably have discussed beforehand
Okay.
if it was getting a bit long, or like people were starting to I might bring it up to her or something, but it never was a big thing or a big focus to bring up. And if there was like a story moment, if like her character had like thrown herself in front of something or like done a big moment to, like, protect someone, maybe at that point it would have been like, hey, you did this, what would you think if your hood got like burned off or
Mhm.
something, and revealed in the air? It would always be one of those things where I would talk with the player first before I would actually do something like that.
I sorry, I'm so stuck on it just never came up because I feel like that's such a D&D thing of like, why do we know this about the character? It I don't know, it never came up. Like nobody asked.
Yeah, I mean, there's a like pretty much basically a naked drunken turtle with the group, so a character just with a hood up, just in the scheme of things, not that strange.
Yeah,
You know?
like there are certain things that I like live for watching people play D&D where it's like I'm not going to kill off the animals just cuz I don't really feel like it. Like it's just the animals can have plot armor or
Mm,
whatever. Which leads me into my next question, something that
yeah.
I've had a big wondering about as I learn is dying is a thing in D&D, like your
Yeah.
character death throws and all that. Do you kind of say to players, especially like new players, maybe have an idea for another one in the back of your head if you bite it, or is it just something that like if you die we'll figure this out later, you can either leave the campaign or we'll figure it out or whatever? How do you handle character deaths within a party?
So we did have a character death, and it was the party had left the single person with basically a body snatcher alone overnight. And I spoke with the individual whose character it was, because he wasn't able to play that session, and it's like, okay, how do you want to do this? I'm not going like, your party left you overnight. It was extenuating circumstances that put this single player in rather large amounts of danger. It's like,
Yeah.
do you want to be, you got away? Do you want to try and fight your way out? Like, how I approached him as to how he wanted to do it. And he's like, no, I'll try and fight it out. It's like, okay, you probably want to think about, like, if your character, if Nipper dies, have a backup. And I worked with him on that, and Nipper ended up dying, and then the guy had his backup character kind of introduced to the party later, like in the session or two later.
Mhm.
um but it's one of those things, it depends also on the campaign itself. Like if it's like a mini shot, um and I know, like, if I'm running a mini shot and it's going to be combat heavy, be like, come to the table with a couple characters made up. Um, if it's kind of more of a long form campaign that I'm planning, no, I don't go in thinking, okay, come in with a couple characters,
Mhm.
because I think that detracts, and then it almost puts not a defeatist attitude, but it's okay. This is just a fodder character. It's going to
Mhm.
die anyway, and I think that detracts from a potentially strong connection a player might have with their character. I'm a firm believer that campaigns need a sense of risk. There has to be a sense of danger, and I've played in campaigns led by my friends of mine, DMs, that have openly said, it's like, oh, don't worry, I'm not, I won't kill you. And it's like, I I I get why you're saying that, but at the same time, if it also removes a lot of the sense of danger. And for some people, they don't want character deaths in their campaigns, and that's perfectly fine for them. Games I don't roll them to be specifically dangerous or aim for a
Mhm.
character death, but I don't want to rule that out of the table, because I think a lot of, there's, hard as it might be, I think that sense of potential risk, potential danger, um, and potentially an actual death could lead to fantastic story uh,
Mhm.
development within the rest of the surviving characters and party members. So I think there's a lot of good storytelling potential there between the DM and the players. And I think it just adds a lot to a campaign to have, to know that it's on the table, not in every situation. but just that.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
with us specifically, Jordan. I mean, you can disagree, but I feel like our group specifically needs death because if death is not on the table, we will do stupid shit. Like,
Yes, I also feel though like
I
how do you find a balance between like death is still something that can possibly happen, but there is still a touch of the main characters have like the tiniest bit of plot armor. Do you think that there's a balance to that, or is it more no, you have to do one or the other?
No, I think it also depends on the encounter that they're
Of
in.
course, yeah.
Mhm.
I think if you're fighting a big bad that like I think there should be that risk. I think if a bunch of really bad rolls happen in a what you plan to be a not very memorable encounter, okay, then maybe fudge a dice and that nat 20 you just rolled was actually a nat 1 and the players can kind of regroup for a second. I think you can play a bit with that from behind the GM screen.
Mhm.
Um cuz I think their deaths should be emotional and impactful and not necessarily just an accident of poor dice.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Is how I would balance it.
I like that because I think that's the thing that I think that when me and LeighErin have been talking about, like
Mhm.
the fact that your D&D character can die has always kind of boggled me. Is just like, so like if I mess up a die roll fighting just like a generic animal, it's over
Mhm.
for like the story I've told so far. So I think I like that
Yeah.
approach that you're talking about. Also, F's in the chat for what it was what was the character's name?
Nipper.
Nipper. F's in the chat for Nipper.
Yep.
Um, no,
The
I love it.
party's
And
barred.
okay, this is the problem with me is you go, okay, it's the party's bard. I'm like, all right, you can lose the bard though. We're not gonna die if we lose the bard. No offense, Jordan. Not that you're a bard.
I'm not
I
playing a
really
bard
thought
this
you were gonna be a
campaign.
bard and you weren't, and I was bummed. But whatever. um, no, yeah, I feel like I'm deeply attached to my character, and we haven't even started playing. So I fear any rolls I have to make because I don't know if I'll recover. I'm deeply attached to this character. Um, but getting into like kind of the roles and the I don't have a better word for it, the kind of like improv game aspect
Mhm.
of D&D. How do you kind of judge what is going to be a hard no, I'm not letting you do this, this does not fit the physics of what we can do, and a all right, well, you can try, like you can try to make a deception roll or or
Yeah.
check or whatever. How do you kind of like handle those situations?
In situations where I'm like, oh, okay, I want the player to flesh it out for me. Like for things that are far more outlandish, if they say I want to do this thing and it's out there and it's like I don't know about that. It's like okay, how would you go about attempting to do this? Okay, let's break down that request, that really odd, strange, giant request that you just threw my way, and then from there. It gets the players to kind of think about is like, okay, how am I going to approach this? How would I go about trying to accomplish this? And then from there, you can then look at, okay, here are potentially two, maybe three different roles, and if they all succeed, good job. It, I am all about rule of cool. So if a player, if it's an outlandish thing, a crazy move that just might work, let them. I like to let them flesh it out
Mhm.
and tell me what they want to do. And yeah, at sometimes it's just like you stumble on your face and you realize that that's not going to work, or you look at it again and it's like 100 feet across. That's not going to work. But
Mhm.
giving them an opportunity to really expand on their idea can also give me and other DMs opportunities to give them roles and let them attempt the more outlandish things is how I would approach something like that.
Okay. Kind of in like the same vein. If you have I from lots of reading different people's takes on how to play the game, I've seen a lot of how you handle things like Oh, my brain is just whoa. Sorry, I got a flat tire on my way home
Oh,
today,
good.
and I'm still recovering from dealing with my flat
All
tire.
good.
But if you have somebody in a game where it's there, Jordan, you are my fear for this, where
Okay,
the
that's fine.
character is doing something that you're like, this is not gonna work out for you, and like could be bad. Do you ever find yourself trying to like lead, or if players just aren't getting what they need to do next, where you're kind of trying to like steer them in the direction that they've got to go, or how do
That's
you
more
handle
me.
parties getting lost?
That's a tough one because um at the end of the day, a D&D campaign is I believe is as much a story that the players are telling as one you are telling. And one of my friends, Emily Rose Jacobson, she's a professional DM. She was on G4. She's run games for Hyper RPG. She's done a bunch of things, and I think she summed up tabletop RPGs the best. It is a shared story that only you and your players can tell. And I think that's the important thing. So, and it goes back to this idea that, or mentality or thought that it's the DM versus the players, that it's some sort of direct confrontation. And like for a major arc, you can probably DMs, if you want, maybe help them. It's like you might not necessarily find as much information at this location. You can still check, but it might not be as worth your time.
Mhm.
Um, Occasionally, I'll do that on a rare case because I want them, if it's to keep things more flowing. But at the other times, some of the biggest story beats in our campaign that have spawned into large arcs and stuff in my game have come because the party wanted to follow up on a random thing I said in an offhand comment. Um, oh, you saw a random missing person report on a guild board because they were investigating, and just offhand I said that, and that spawned. It's like, oh, we're gonna check on this, and then it was like, okay, now I have to come up with people that they're interviewing and going all to this, and it led them down to a sewer where they found all this stuff, and it eventually ended up in Nipper's death, and it's like this whole
This
this
is why I love this game. This is
yeah,
why
it's like
it's like an offhand comment led to a character dying.
exactly, and it's like and then as a DM, it's like, okay, this is kind of the angle I was going with the story, but let's take this like body snatching, like people being kidnapped and like doppelgangers, like homunculi being put in their places, like as like sleeper agents. What would that mean? And then giving that little hint for future story stuff that I had kind of planned.
Mhm.
But a lot of that, like a 2 month string of stories all came about because they were like, yeah, I really want to check out this guild, this message board, and I'm really curious about this missing person report. And it's like, okay, but it can lead to some really fun and memorable parts of the campaign. So I think DMs also have to kind of roll with the punches too. And
Let it roll, yeah.
yeah,
And how do you choose when, assuming they're not, now
yeah.
in the sewers when the main plot is taking, I'm assuming, above the sewers, but like, how do you choose to pivot when you are going to actually progress the main overarching plot versus doing the for lack of a better word, the filler in the middle?
I so I have portions like after big arcs. I have filler mini arcs kind of currently in my uh document of arcs and planning for the main story. And if possible, I try and wrap these random events into, okay, how can I naturally have this kind of flow back into what they're looking into?
Mhm.
Um and that I think is where I also thrive because I love kind of those creative solutions and being able to kind of problem solve on my end. Okay, how do I naturally make this flow back in? Okay, so they find the actual person they were looking for that had been body snatched. Okay, he's in rough shape. Let's take it to the guild doctors or the hospital. Okay, they need to research or they want to test the fluid that he was floating in. Okay, that can then be spawned to, okay, this is interesting, take this to this location that I was going to have them be check out, or kind of naturally flow them back on the path or
Mhm.
lead that I want to. But yeah, it definitely takes um a creative problem solving to kind of rework the road, so
Yeah.
it reincorporates the side path that pet players decide to take.
So with I okay, part of the reason I have gotten very into D&D and want to learn how to play and have been watching 8 million different people play campaigns is my background's all in theater and creative writing. It's what I
Hmm.
went to undergrad and my master's for. So I come into, like, when we were creating our character, what is my character's goal? I just hear my acting teacher in the background of like, what does your character want? What does they need? And what's the difference? Is that something you personally in your own games kind of have, this is my character arc and it, or this is my player's character arc, and they have a backstory? I'm going to use Critical Role as an example. I'm
Yeah.
so sorry. I'm sure there are
No,
plenty of people that are like,
I love
noobs.
critical. I'm a critter, so it's fine.
I love it. I watched all of Vox Machina in.
But that's what I did over the pandemic. I was like, I don't have, but up till then, I did not have time to sit down and get into it. But it's like, I suddenly have no work and I'm stuck in my house.
Right.
Let's try it. And oh yeah, Vox Machina
Love
is
it.
that's my party.
I just slowly am making everyone watch the Amazon show. I
Great
am walking
show,
through my not great show. Great show.
fantastic
At this
show.
point, they need to hire you as a PR person because you're just converting people like a missionary.
Truly, I have in the last month convinced 5 different people to watch all of Legends of Vox Machina and 3 different people to watch Dimension 20's Fantasy High first season. I'm just slowly like I'm converting everyone. I'm
It's
obsessed.
good stuff.
But in Vox Machina, you have like Percy, where there is a
Yep.
big arc that has to do with Percy's back. Spoilers for Vox Machina,
Yep.
but they murked Percy's family. That's his big draw, and it becomes a large part of the campaign where everyone is involved. And then you have things like Fantasy High, where
Mm-hmm.
Kristen Appleby's storyline started, oh, you're a cleric, you're coming to the school to convert everybody, and it slowly kind of changed. How do you handle those like personal character arcs in? Is that something that's more the player and you work on it together, or?
Yeah. So, I make sure, especially when like people made their characters, it's like, tell me a bit about them. Like, what's not necessarily their deep, like, but like, what do they enjoy? Like, what are their motivations? Not necessarily what their end goal is, but like, why are they out adventuring? Like,
Mhm,
just general little things like that. Doesn't have to be super specific, but from there, it's okay. And over the course of campaigns and just me thinking of cool ideas, I kind of flesh it out. I have one character, Pepper, a kinder, and they came from like a magical family, but she never really had magical talents, and it kind of always bummed them out. And they went on to out to explore, very kind of hyper and like love to check things out and kind of explore more of the human and other creature worlds.
mhm,
And from there, and she had a very strong connection to the Moonweaver, kind of like a spirit, one of the deities in the world.
mhm,
So I've just knowing her character's desire to kind of like know magic to discover, I wove it like it was because Pepper had her magic was just shown differently, and it's more like directly, very much in a not quite a champion of like from Vox Machina, but the idea is like you're helping, and here's like
mhm,
a need, like a thread that you can kind of weave and actually like stitch together magic and kind of use it as a focal point. So that was the thing that wasn't in her backstory, but I used what I was provided to kind of flesh that out.
mhm,
And there's other things like with Fen, the character who I talked about earlier that had the big character moment. Hers was a bit more of a tragic upbringing. Like her village was raised, like destroyed as a young child, and she was whisked away, and she was kind of raised by the Lyceum, which is like the knowledge center of Telthradus. Um, but because of a interesting encounter with an archfey, um, saying to her just simply because he tasted all the characters' blood and kind of had a mysterious line that he said to everyone. And one of the things that he said is, "Oh, interesting. I thought you had all been gotten rid of, or we had gotten rid of all of you." Um, and I this is one of the big storylines and kind of branches that I cannot wait for my party members to kind of go down.
Mhm.
Figuring out with the Fae and the secrets with these witch covens that kind of no longer exist,
Mhm.
but also kind of exist. It's very mysterious. But I have all that. I have the big reveals kind of planned out.
Okay. Yeah, because we're kind of a mixed bag with our party right now. So
Hmm.
we have a monk, we have Jordan's a fighter, and I'm a ranger, and kind of like Alec, who is another member of Shared Screen, who is playing the monk. He was kind of like, I want to fill in like gaps in the party, and we have another player in our party
Yeah.
who's like, yeah, I'm gonna fill in any gaps, and then you have like me because I'm obsessive, where I have this deep backstory I wrote for this tiefling of like kind of similar to what you just described. She's
Yeah.
a tiefling, people tend to not like them. She got abandoned in the woods and raised by wood elves, and so like starting to kind of work with who I think is going to end up being our DM on how that would move
Yeah.
forward. And like, so I've just always been curious about how you balance of not making it like the it's this character show for a little bit, but we'll get back to why Jordan has an eye patch eventually.
Yeah.
Um,
I I try and right now I have kind of an arc or at least a mini arc or portions of the main arcs that will address each one of the characters' stories.
mhm,
So right now my wife's character Nissa, right now we are dealing with an they're trying to figure it out and stop an assassination attempt on the Pope. But her family, she was basically um raised by the head of the uh the world's kind of seedy assassin thieves guild of the world, and it's putting her into kind of the crosshairs and kind of the first time she has to really deal with seeing and interacting with her family again after her mother attempted to kill her and was basically left her for dead
good lord.
um like years before the campaign. So
Mhm,
Yikes.
it's not like the arc is very much still them trying to figure out who hired the group for the assassination, who for sure is the assassination target, how are they planning to do it, and how can they stop it.
mhm.
But because of Nissa's backstory and kind of her history, it's reintroducing stuff from her background and her story, and it's still, but it's adding to it. It's not putting the shining light.
Yeah, and I feel like it gives you a fun opportunity to be like, you don't have to go look up or talk to NPCs for information. You have somebody who, if you can convince her to tell you her secrets, has a lot of that info.
Right.
Um, I'm God, I'm so excited for us to start playing this campaign.
And I
Um,
think a lot of that growth happens naturally. I
mhm,
think it will just naturally happen and kind of flesh out and grow over the course of playing a campaign
yeah,
too.
yeah.
I have a question on different types of checks, but I guess for the
Sure.
example I'll use will be perception checks. Generic, you see an NPC, my character thinks NPC looks sketchy. Let's just say he's not supposed to be. If I roll low, is it that I misread the vibe? And so, because it's a low roll, I now technically know that it's not a sketchy person.
Well, I would say so. This perception roll is to determine. So you have already seen him because, like, if for a low perception roll, if you haven't already encountered the person or had another check where you that specifically states you see this individual, I would just say the perception check you don't see anyone that sticks out to you
Mhm.
is how
Okay.
I would handle it. Like if there was another if you bumped into the individual or something that directly like put you in line
Yeah.
with them, then you could do like a perception of and a low roll is like this dude looks shady AF,
Mhm.
if they are.
Yeah. But so maybe I'm making circles in my brain. If it's a low roll, is it in act like am I technically wrong in what I believe? And so obviously, like maybe
I
this
would
is
say so.
bleeding into metagaming where it's
No,
like you tell me, oh no, this person's cool, but it was a low roll, so now I'm like, oh, maybe he's not because it was
I think that's the DM's call at that point. Like if it's
okay.
a random passerby in the street, and like my players bumped into him and looked, and they wanted to check something about the person, a low roll, I would probably approach like with a low roll, um, that player has like an over exaggerated thought, like over exaggerates what the person looks like. It could be
Okay.
just like a quick grimace or like pain or something, but with a low roll, they might think, oh, the person looks or is like staring daggers or like looks to be reaching for something behind his belt, like something kind of very over dramatic and over extra, basically, for a low roll in a situation like that, like over analyze the situation maybe.
Gotcha.
How as a checks are like the most fascinating part of the game to me for like the
Hmm.
DM, especially because like people say really off the cuff stuff when they're playing that it's like how do you kind of go about deciding what when somebody says not in combat but like in
Yeah.
a just general interaction, oh I want to do whatever. How do you decide like between athletics and acrobatics or investigation and perception, like those ones where I feel like they're the same thing?
Oh yeah, yeah,
um
yeah. Um,
Whenever somebody's like give me an acrobatics roll, I'm like I don't understand how this is different than athletics.
yeah, it's one of those things. Acrobatics and athletics, I can usually tell I can usually differentiate a bit more, but like perception and investigation, I'm a bit more iffy on.
Mhm.
And honestly, it flavor of the day. Um, and depending on what they're doing in the character,
Mhm.
um, I would probably try to, if I know the character's stat sheets or have their character sheet up, I might lean more often than not on a stat or like one of those checks that they might be a bit better in,
Mhm.
as unless it's like drastically out of their wheelhouse or would be something that they would not have had experience with, um but give the players a bit benefit of the doubt depending on the situation, I guess, is how I'd approach it.
I just wonder because, like, I really put a lot into strength and dexterity when I
Hmm.
was making my sheet, and so like I have like a 4 athletics, and I never want anything. I never wanted acrobatics. 'Cause I have like a 1, but I just can I make the argument on why it should be in athletics for me and not acrobatic?
Yeah, I think I let my players do that. I encourage them to, if they think it should be something, if they can prevent me a reason why it should be something like that. It's like, but I want to like kind of cartwheel out of the way of danger. It's like not okay, interesting, but I guess that would be acrobatics then, as opposed to just like diving or running out of the way, which would be, I guess, more athletics, just athleticism. But
So I'm gonna use another example for from Critical Role to kind of explain where this question is kind
yeah,
of coming from. But the door in Vox Machina that
which one?
fucking Scanlan
There's a
and
lot of
Vax that they
doors.
stab the instead of just doing anything
Fuck.
other than stabbing a knife through the door and lifting it by the blade, they stab the knife through the door and lift it by the blade. And obviously, like Scanlan takes damage. He's holding a blade. When you get into your players are not seeing the simplest answer that's right in front of them. How as a DM do you try to like help them out a little bit of like, guys, you might be making this more complicated than you need to. Like,
I think it depends on how the party members are reacting to the situation. Like if they are visibly getting frustrated and like how, oh, this I'm frustrated and like not having fun,
mhm.
then I would probably do like, oh, and then suddenly you roll a perception check. Okay, cool. You found a random switch on next to it in a key or something. But if they're like having fun, if they're laughing about the absurdity of what's going on, then I might let them. let them go through with it. And if they end up just wanting to spend one of their high level spell slots to blast the door open, I mean, hey, if they're having fun and laughing at the whole time, it's like let them have fun. But I think when they start getting visibly frustrated by it, and that's when you step in and it's like, okay, and then you notice something, you know.
Yeah. No, I live because I feel like the half the fun is the how do I creatively get myself out of this
Yeah.
predicament that I can't see and I'm not really in. Um
One of the things that I like to do and that I've done a couple times is I will make a scenario or like a trap or like I will put them in an environment where I don't have a response to how they will get out or get past it. Like a giant chasm is like, yeah, how you gonna do it? I don't
figure it
know.
out.
I didn't figure it out. That's on you guys. And seeing them put together their own um thought like ideas and clever plans and seeing how they fail miserably or succeed
Mhm.
spectacularly is part of the fun, I think. So
There you go.
I don't think DMs always have to have a solution,
Yeah.
because on our end it's easy enough to just magically retcon in a solution if things are taking too long or they're getting frustrated. So
Yeah. Um, yeah, I just always wonder that because it feels like one of the roles of the DM is kind of like, hey, if your party's stagnating and like not really moving anymore,
mhm.
you kind of finding creative ways to like get you
Yep.
going. Back on your little track. What I also hate about myself is you said that one of the characters in your campaign was named Pepper, and my brain immediately went, "That's the weasel's name. My weasel is gonna be Pepper." It's not gonna be.
There
I
you
was
go.
originally gonna name it Barry Manilow, but
Why?
I'll
because
switch it up.
when we created our characters, some of the people we talked to who had played before were like, for ease of figuring out kind of what you want your backstory to be and what character you want, what class, think of like something you kind of want it to emulate.
Yeah.
And mine was Hellboy. I wanted to make a tiefling that was like
Gotcha.
essentially Hellboy. I am born of demons, but I am trying to prove that I'm this good person. So instead of being obsessed
Mhm.
with cats, I'd have a weasel. And like as a little like thing to Hellboy, Hellboy loves Barry Manilow in the movies, and so I was gonna have a weasel named Barry Manilow, but I think it's gonna be Pepper now. um,
Would be
I
even
love
better
animals.
if there isn't a Barry Manilow like famous character. You just like full first name last name Barry Manilow Weasel.
Yeah,
Um,
like why? I don't know. It's fun.
it fit
Um,
him.
Barry the Weasel Manilow.
God,
Barry Weaselow.
good. Um, yeah, I just feel like this is all the fun of D&D is when you just get to be like creative little weirdos around a table. So as we kind of like start to wrap things up here, do you have any like moments in any campaign, whether it's a campaign you're running now or campaigns you've played as players in, where it's like you guys got like a great role and it's a role that like I'm trying to think of like an example of just like it's I compare the a lot what D&D part of
Mm-hmm.
what it does for me is that it hits that part that like sports hit that when your team like hits the ball in the net in a way that you did not think they were going to
Mm-hmm.
make that goal and it's that excitement or a big one in Crown of Candy is they basically he was Brennan was like you have to roll a nat 20 and Lou ends up rolling a nat 20. Any like big moments like that where you just feel this kind of like pride and camaraderie with the table?
I can't think necessarily of a time when they got a defining like high roll.
Mhm.
One of the moments that do stand out. So we have this player. Her name's Drakina, and she's this ranger that thinks she's really dexterous and like nimble. And it was at the end. It was leading up to the big bad fight for like the end of the first arc, and they were in this large room, like almost a underground warehouse that they had stumbled on, and they were filled with these glass tanks with floating partially mutated like prisoners and like homunculi and everything. And the rest of the party was sneaking, like trying getting close to this hooded figure, and Trakina, being the dexterous ranger and everything, decided to get on top of one and start trying to jump from one to the other. And she must have rolled like 4 or 5 like under 5 rolls, like total. and a couple nat ones. So she like would run and then face plant into the next one and then scurry back up. And it but like her yelping and everything just, and she kept trying, God bless her, to just be like this very dexterous, like you're Vax.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, she was trying to be Vax, like very dynamic and sneaky, jumping from one to the other. But it was just so hilariously, the rolls were so hilariously bad that it drew the individual over. So he didn't notice the other, so they were still able to like get kind of the drop on him and everything, and it worked out. But I will just always remember the tenacity and her resolve to try and make these really cool jumps from uh glass
Tank to
tube,
tank.
glass tank to tank, and just failing miserably. It was, oh, and she had a thing where um eh, she had gotten a whip at some point. Like she wanted a
That's
whip,
typical.
and they were in a bar or something, and she wanted to do a performance check, and she was like, she took the stage with Nipper the bar to try and like distract people. I don't remember the specific reason, but she rolled like 2 nat 1s during this performance, so she accidentally like whipped her friend and like one of the members of the audience, and it was hilarious, and everyone is very careful around her when she brings her whip out at this
It's
point.
honestly, I feel like the high rolls and the really low rolls are sometimes
Yeah,
like the best
it's
things
the
that happen.
extremes. It is hands down the extremes, and yeah, like I, like nat 20s are really cool when you get them in the moment, and unless you like kill like the big bad enemy, I feel like those um kind of fade into just the overall campaign uh events and the happenings of it,
Mhm.
whereas nat ones are just hilarious, and like those are the moments that you like really remember, I feel like,
Yeah.
uh and can look back on it as like, I can't believe you did that, but it was so funny. um but yeah, I
So
remember the low rolls.
when she was jumping from tank to tank and getting these low rolls,
Yep.
what makes you choose, hey, you're just gonna fall, you're gonna face plant, versus you're gonna fall into one of these tanks, it couldn't support you?
There
You
was
choose
lids
to
on them.
punish.
So yeah, there was a lid on them, so she couldn't fall into one of the tanks.
Gotcha.
Mhm.
Okay.
All right. Jordan, do you have any like final questions or
Yeah,
final thoughts?
I'll give a lighthearted one to end it with. Is there an IP you wish that they would make like an official licensed D&D for, or that you wish you could write one for?
I would love a supplemental book. There's 2 supplemental books I would love. I would love a D&D supplement, like a book release that dives into post level 20 stuff. Like give me post level 20 character, like a spell level 10, like the super stuff, like if you want those things.
Mhm.
Um but other than that, I would love a really fleshed out, broken down supplement for Final Fantasy stuff,
Ooh,
because
Oh
they
yeah.
have amazing jobs and stuff in that I would love a Final Fantasy supplement, like
that's a
that,
good one.
adaptation.
All right. Um, is there anything else you want to, as we wrap up here, any final advice you have for new players or people who are looking to get into D&D? Just anything for
Yeah.
noobs like Jordan and I.
For sure. For DMs that are looking to homebrew a world and stuff, don't try and do it all in one go. Have Google Docs and let it kind of grow and expand as you go. If you are making your own world, it's your own world. You can tweak it on the fly, and if characters haven't stumbled on something, it's not set in stone yet. Um, so don't feel like you have to wait until you have the mythos, the governmental system, the breakdown of religions, and everything like that, before you take players into your world.
Mhm.
Um, and just know that it's ever evolving, and you will just take notes, make a Google Doc, make more Google Docs, and just have fun with it. And creativity and ideas will strike you in the strangest of times when you're not expecting it. So have a notebook around if you can.
Huh. Jordan, any final words of wisdom? I don't know.
Nah, I think I'm good.
Well, thank you so much, Scott, for sitting down and talking about all of that with us. That's super. I'm so excited to get deep into. I'm becoming just my final form with this.
Well, it
Um,
was glad to come. Thank you for having me.
yeah, of course. Thank you so much. Where can people find you online? Where can they follow you?
Sure. So I host my own RPG podcast called RPG University, where I sit down with guests and we nerd out about RPGs, be it tabletop or video games that we really love. We reminisce about our favorite moments and memories from that game or sessions and whatnot. And then we also provide tips and tricks for new players that might be interested in getting into the game. And we also share other memories and favorite moments and memories with people from around the internet. So you can follow me at Professor RPG on Twitter or the show at _RPG University with new episodes airing every other Thursday. So
Perfect. And for all the shared screen stuff, you can follow us online at Shared Screens Pod. Be sure to continue New Rollers. We're going to be having new episodes with different DMs and different roundtables with players all the way up leading to our campaign this fall. We're so excited to dive into this. Thank you one more time, Scott, for joining us
of
and
course.
sharing all of your expertise. Until next time, guys. Bye.